Hello students, we're doing a revision for the final exam, so it's very important that you watch this because we've got some very good tips and we've got lots of suggested answers for you as well, so do have a look at this. So just in the introduction, these slides cover most of the 20 multiple choice questions and the 4 written questions in the final exam. Remember that with the written questions you only need to answer 3. Please do not answer 4. The first section is the multiple choice, and then we'll do a separate section with the written questions. With the multiple choice questions, I'd like you to use the bubble sheets. Just listen to the instructions of how to do that if you're not familiar with it. And if you do make a mistake or an error, just ask for another bubble sheet. Okay, we've got plenty of them. So just going straight into multiple choice questions. Now we started the whole topic 12 weeks ago. We talked about the importance of communication, and we also talked about the 3 forms of communication. One was verbal, where we use words. This can be either written or spoken. Then there was non-verbal, where we don't use words. Okay, there's lots of different types. And then the visual is when we use images or pictures or graphs. Okay, 3 main forms of communication. There's definitely a multiple choice question on these definitions. What's the difference between communication singular and communication plural? Communication singular is the study of the transfer of meaning. Okay, so it's the actual words that we say or the meaning that we put across. Can even be giving a bunch of flowers or something like that. Then communications plural with an S on it is the study of the transfer of data. And this usually relates to the physics and the mechanics of telecommunications, satellites, internet, etc. And these are called channels. So we should use the word channels. There's another question on what is a webinar. I use webinars a great deal for my professional development. It's short for web-based seminar, is what it means. A webinar is a presentation, a lecture, a workshop, or a seminar that's transmitted over the web using video conferencing software. A key feature of a webinar is that it's interactive. It's interactive. You can ask questions, you can get answers. Elements of the ability to give, receive, and discuss information in real time. Webinars are very useful learning tools. There's also a question on team development, and it's basically about the order of Bruce Tuckman's 5 stages of team development, and they should be in the correct order. That is forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjoining or mourning. That's the 5 stages of development. There's another question on the Harvard referencing system. This is what we use at UBSS and most international business schools and universities. There are 2 parts of it as follows, so you remember to do the 2 parts. There's the in-text citations. This is where you use directly quotes or paraphrasing or anything that you use from somebody else, and it's located in the body of the work. Okay, and I have an example for it. This example is in inverted commas. After that I lived as a young Raja in all the capitals of Europe. And then after that is the name of the writer, the author, and the year of the publication in brackets. That's how it should look and should be in the actual document that you're writing. The second part is the reference list. And these are always on a separate page at the end of the work. And it displays the full citation of sources used, and I have an example here. For example, this is Fitzgerald. You have the family name first, then his initial, the year it was published, the name of the book or the article, and where it was published, New York, and the name of the actual company that published it. That's how your Harvard referencing system should look like. Must be in all essays. Okay, you must use references in essays. There's another question about the scope of reports. Now, before you actually write a report, you should actually consider the scope, and that includes the terms of reference for the report, what the report's about, and what it's not about. In other words, what it only contains. The scope of the report will determine the structure of the report. So before we write a report, we should consider the scope before we even start writing. There's another question on editing. To edit a document, you need to do these things. You need to check the punctuation and spelling to make sure you haven't got any errors. Check the flow of the information, that it flows from one thing to another. Check the clarity of expression. How clear is it? Is it easy to understand? Are you communicating effectively? And that it meets the requirements of the scope, and then correct any errors. That's what you should be doing when you're editing any document. In fact, I always think you should even do it when you're checking your emails, when you're editing emails, before you hit the send button. There's a question on non-verbal communication, and as we know, it's where you don't use words, no words at all. And there's a whole different types of non-verbal communication. You can see from that list it's pretty extensive. The one I have actually bolded is the one that there's a question about, which is facial expressions. And this one is about what they call a poker face. It's a rigid or expressionless face with a lack of facial expression. It's very good for using when you're negotiating something and playing poker, and that's why it's called a poker face. Deadpan, in other words. Some cultures use it all the time. There's another question about reports versus essay, the comparison. Reports always use subheadings, always. They use plain English, they use sentences and paragraphs which are much shorter. They're mainly about facts, the whole thing is about facts, except for the recommendation, which is usually your recommendation. And they use visuals and graphs, bullet points, numbers, all that type of thing. So they look quite different. The structure of a report is very different than the structure and layout of an essay. An essay contains just paragraphs, no subheadings. It also uses academic language. Sentences and paragraphs are longer, and it's a real combination of facts and opinions, your opinions and others' opinions. This is why you always have sources. That's why you always have references for essays. Often for reports, they're not required. Another question involves assertiveness. And remember, the definition of assertiveness is getting what you want from others without infringing on their rights. Okay. Assertiveness is good. Being assertive is a good attribute to have, a good way to express yourself. Being passive, where people walk all over you and never being able to say what you think and feel, is not good for you. It's bad. Being aggressive, which is is also bad. It gets what you want with infringing on other people's rights. It's not good. It's very aggressive. Quite a few people are aggressive. There's another question on a wiki. What is a wiki? And it's a website that allows visitors to make changes, contributions, or corrections. In other words, a document with multiple collaborating authors, different writers. Because if you think of Wikipedia, it's not written by one person, it's written by hundreds. Same as WikiTravel, WikiHow, and Wikibooks, but there's lots of different wikis. Another question's on online writing, and it's basically using the advantage of over linear writing. Now, linear writing, as you know, is just writing from left to right, and it's usually using pen and paper. Whereas online writing is using a computer. It's non-linear. It's called mosaic, and it's different than the traditional descriptive text. Mosaic writing is what they call three-dimensional. It's not just one-dimensional, which is what linear writing is. So an advantage over linear writing is it's able to show movement and animation. That's the main reason, a main benefit of using a mosaic writing, online writing. Another question we have is about using the quick access toolbar in Microsoft Word. And we explained it's located above the toolbar and is extremely useful for fast access. I use mine all the time. Suggest you add by clicking the down arrow button and add things like new, save and print preview, because there's a question about print preview. Or Always use print preview before you complete any document to check the layout and structure of each page. Basically, it's like a magnifying glass, as in the picture, and it shows you the whole page. So you can check the layout, you can check the margins, you can check how it looks on the page, you can check that there's enough white space on the page to rest your eyes. So always use print preview before you send any document or complete any document to really check to make sure the layout and the structure is good. There's another question on blogs, and in social media lecture we talked about the many platforms for social media besides Facebook, which you all seem to use, Twitter and LinkedIn. It's a blog. Now, a blog is a personal online diary or logbook. Not only do personal people have them, but in actual fact businesses are now also using blogs as well, just to get their message out to people. Another question was about conflict and the most common approach in managing conflict. We see in the picture here people having conflict, disagreements, and one of the best ways of managing conflict is using negotiating skills. Okay, using that negotiating skills. There's lots of other different techniques, but this is the most common approach in managing conflict. There's one question about meetings, and it's talking about basically the chairperson. And this is the person who presides over a meeting according to the rules. They are known as the chair. You know, in Australia we abbreviate everything, so they're often called the chair. They are the leader, and they will call for votes to confirm decisions made by a meeting or a committee. There's actually 2 questions about this particular topic on the multiple choice questions. There's another one about emotional intelligence, but this is actually not so much emotional intelligence, but the core skills of emotional competency, how competent you are at emotional intelligence. And these 4 things are: being self-aware, knowing who you are, how your emotions are. Self-management is controlling your emotions, particularly in appropriate situations. Another one is social awareness, being aware of the people around you, your family, your friends, your business colleagues, your classmates. Socially aware, it's called. And the last one is relationship management. How do you manage relationships? Emotional intelligence is now very useful in every part of your life. Another question is on document design, and it's on pie charts and graphs at all, and you need to know what the difference is. A pie, or sometimes called a circle chart, a graph like they're shaped like a pie and cut into sections, as you can see from the visual here. So they show the relative importance of any components of parts. Okay, that's what a pie chart does. The bar charts are different. They use the X and Y axes. They consist of bars that are arranged either horizontally or vertically. So there's quite a difference between these 2 types of document design visuals. There are many, many types of graphs, but these are the 2 major ones we seem to use a lot. Another thing that we discussed in class was chart junk. Now, chart junk is an interesting thing because it means it's unnecessary or distracting graphs. Don't use them. It's important to use appropriate and easy to understand graphics. No point in putting them in if they're not going to make sense and they're unnecessary. Chart junk. That's the end of the multiple choice questions.